are we really where we want to be
Mm-hmm.
in terms of engagement? So, and I think that's also one of those that is going to be perpetually just out of arm's reach. I mean, I think if you feel like you've done it all and you've achieved it, then you're probably fooling yourself. So it's to just keep challenging yourself about whatever level you might have achieved and success you've had is, okay, well then how, like any relationship, then how could we be slightly better? How could we really deliver an experience from the engagement standpoint that would be, that would be jaw-dropping.
So welcome to the Better People Podcast. I'm Margaret, and joining me today is Matt Murphy, CEO of InHome Therapy. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I am thrilled to have you here. So Matt, can I ask you to just share a little bit about yourself with our listeners? What is it you think would be most helpful for them to know before we launch into our show today?
Sure thing. I'll give you a few minutes on my background. So I started my career as a naval officer. And from there, I went to law school, practiced law, health law for a few years. But most of my career since has been in purpose-driven people businesses, in and around healthcare for the last 20 years.
Okay, wow. So CEO of InHome Therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a young company. It's 3 years old, correct? So where did the idea come from?
So this was... think back 3 years ago, it was, as we were, call it mid-pandemic, and lots of focus on healthcare in the home. And so the idea then was to build a company that would focus on great clinicians providing a very needed service in the home. We had a really broad mandate when we set out on this investment thesis about what it is that we wanted to create. And but those tenets around finding the right group of people to deliver that kind of care in the home was what we eventually circled in on and really got focused on.
So you have two private equity firms that saw something in your idea, got excited enough to invest. So what do you think that was?
Yeah, so I think there's some of the uniqueness around what we're doing is now, home health is an established industry, and it's a very valuable service and a much needed industry. But where we saw some differentiation and some opportunity to create something of value is around building a community of therapists. So the home health industry is very nurse dominated, but what we wanted to do is create something that really heroicized the work that therapists do in the home. So we created a community of therapists so that's physical therapists, occupational therapists, and speech therapists that are really focused on improving rehab in the home.
And that's all you do, are those three areas?
That's
okay,
just
so that's the focus.
Yep.
Perfect. So how large are you now?
So we've grown through 7 acquisitions. So two that would go back to 3 years ago. One was a business here outside of Philadelphia. One was a business outside of Chicago. And since then, we've grown through both coasts of Florida and all the major markets in Texas.
Oh, wow. So how many employees do you have?
We have about 700 some odd number of therapists, and then another 75 or so in the back office that make the business work.
So that's a lot of employees.
It is, yeah. Lots of lots. We want to be in a people business, so we have a lot of people.
There you go. So I know from talking with you that you do have a vision for this organization. You also have a strong purpose. So can you tell us about that? Yeah.
So from a purpose standpoint, it's around. It's so that our patients, therapists, and agencies who we serve can rise together. So what we like about that, our direction, our purpose is around it. It is the interaction of those three constituencies. It's obviously got to focus on the patient, but our focus can then be on the folks that are improving the lives of our patients. So through our therapists. So, and it's, one of the things we've always really just felt great about the business is the importance of rehab in the home. So the people that we serve, the patients that we serve are technically homebound. And so what makes them homebound is generally a lack of mobility. And so the demographic that we serve is typically a population that has lots of things that they're battling. So they have multiple morbidities is what it's called. So, but we've always felt that if we can get those people on their feet, if we can make them mobile, then everything else that they're struggling with just is it improves with mobility. Even to the fact that what qualifies them as homebound, if we can make them more mobile, then they can go get the needed services in whatever facility that they need to get it. So, so we feel really passionately about, about our purpose, about the importance of rehab in the home, and about the impact that it can have on our patients.
So let me just ask, so your purpose statement was rise together?
Yeah.
I love that.
For therapists, patients, and agencies to rise together. And, it has a play on both as from a therapy standpoint, the physical act of rising, and then I'll call it the spiritual element as well about just general improvement.
Yeah. And so I know you were going to talk about the vision that you have also for the organization.
Yeah. So, our aim is to be the largest of what we do. So we want to be the largest contract therapy business aimed at home health. So that's, if we're going to do it, we might as well try to take over the world. So that's our goal, is to ascribe to that level.
And so do you have a plan as to when that might happen?
That was another part of the investment thesis that, there's an opportunity. No one else has taken on to do that in our space, with the focus that we have. So we think that it's achievable in the next handful of years.
Wow.
If we do it right.
All right. Awesome. Well, from what I understand and listening to you and the conversations we've had, and I think some of the things you're going to share with our listeners, it sounds to me like you're doing it right.
So far, so good.
Yeah. Well, and that brings us to really the core of our topic today. And that was about engagement and how significant really engagement is for you. It's for your organization, for the people you serve, for the growth you want to have.
Right.
So talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think engagement is very critical to our business. I think a lot of businesses can make that claim, and I think as consumers, we can all think of a lot of examples where you both spot it and where you spot the absence of it. So think about the times when you've been motivated to write that letter to somebody's manager to say, this person gave me fantastic service. And that's the standard we really are pushing ourselves to, is to create those kinds of experiences. And again, think back to whether it's with a teacher or a wait staff or, in a retail setting. So many opportunities when, just again, as consumers, when you engage, well, we want to create that same level of engagement with our therapist, so that they are delivering on our behalf, on behalf of the company, that kind of an experience that would motivate somebody to want to write the letter to say, boy, I had such a positive experience with your therapist because of this, because they could tell the engagement. And the particular challenge that we have, again, every business has these challenges, but in ours, it's because that our 750 clinicians are in the field, and we don't have the opportunity to work side by side with them in a typical office or even in a virtual environment. So they start their day in their driveway and they end their day in their driveway. And along the way, they're driving in between patients' houses and seeing patients all day long. So, our opportunities to engage are through text messaging, and they're through all the other communication that we aim at them, but it's not in sort of your classic side by side, in a facility or in an office environment. So for us, that's why we we really have to focus on it. It can't be a byproduct for us. It's got to be something that we intentionally create.
So in our conversation that we had last week, you referred to your therapist, the people out with the patients, as your heroes.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really just awesome. I mean, and that mindset that you have. And I know that's a big part of the engagement. So how do you tie all that together?
Yeah, I think it's really understanding, and back to our purpose statement, that the therapists are the stars of the show. And we actually use that language that, and then the rest of us, those of us that have never healed anybody, those of us that are on the corporate team, for lack of a better word, we're the stagehands. So it's important work, what we're doing as well, but the magic happens when the patient and the therapist get together. So that's the reason we exist. Mm-hmm. So if you're not in our company, if you're not healing somebody, then you need to be enabling somebody to go heal somebody. So that's the importance of both roles. Mm-hmm. They're both, equally necessary, but the stars of the show are the therapist.
Yeah. So what are some things that you've done, with regards to creating that engagement that you are that you need to be striving for and always focused on? What would you say are some things that you put in place?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of really small things. It's detailed things. Mm-hmm. But it's paying attention to all those things. So one of the things that we do is, first is just to kind of create the awareness again for those of us that are the stagehands, that we can really appreciate what the therapist's life is like. So, and one of my favorite things is ride-alongs. So we'll spend a part of a day going out with our therapist, making visits with them to patients. And I think if you talk to other folks in the company in the back office, they'll almost to a person probably say it's one of the favorite things that they get to do is to really to see it firsthand and to see the impact and the importance of it. I think sometimes the clinicians, because they do it all day long and they've done it for their entire careers, I think I've done maybe 12 or 14 of these visits, and I could recite to you the details of every one just because they're so impactful to those of us that are normally sitting behind a computer or on a phone, to actually see that the magic happen. It's a very powerful experience. So I think that's one of the ways we create that engagement is just the appreciation, the awareness, getting to know what life is really like for our therapist out in the road. And then I think the rest of it is to, one, to be a really good, it's like any other relationship, right? So it's being a really good listener. It's understanding, what is it that we could do to make you feel more engaged? And it's little things like, the timing and the way that we might interact with them via text messaging. It's, creating enough opportunities so that we can get to know them, through whether it's happy hours or in-service trainings that we do, but to create events where we can actually, meet people. And sometimes, given that we're in multiple states, that is also a challenge. So it's just old-fashioned pick up the phone and talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Hey, I can't ride along with you, but can I be on the cell phone with you while you're in between visits so I can just get a chance to hear from you and to make sure that therapist knows that they're seen and that we appreciate them. So it's, I wish there was a magic wand, but it's really just paying attention to every facet of the interaction that we have with those folks out in the field, and to make sure that we're being really thoughtful about that, to meet them where they want to be met and to engage in the way that they want to be engaged with. So,
yeah, I would imagine. Well, let me clarify. If I understand correctly, you said everyone, all the stagehands have the opportunity to do these ride-alongs.
Yeah, opportunity and actually compelled to.
Yeah,
it's important that everybody has that experience so they can really appreciate why we exist.
Yeah, exactly. So, is there anything I'm putting you on the spot here with this one, but from either your ride-along or a ride-along that somebody else on your team has had, have you or have they come back and said, we need to change XYZ because of the experience I just had?
Yeah, geez, absolutely. There things, learnings that we've had that the therapist might have just taken for granted that had to be the way that it was. That by, well, and I'll just use a few from my own experience. So, I was in Austin, Texas with a PTA, a physical therapist assistant, and she was delightful, and obviously was just so great with the patients. I remember the patient. What was unique about her is that she had while we were there, she was very careful that her two dogs were watching the right cartoons. So she was a kind of a funny patient. But what I learned from this therapist is that I said, well, so what can we do better? What is it that you need? And she said, boy, it'd be great if we had, a program where I could download exercises that I could print off. And I'm like, we have that. So shame on us that you weren't aware that resource was available to you. Right. So the light bulb moment for me was just because we've created it and we might have, done a communication around it, is that, that we needed to do a better job and be more thorough and to make sure that folks, really knew about that. And I think some of the others is just, there are just challenges throughout the day that these folks have because of the nature of what we do. They're out on the road. So I think sometimes, we might, the team might get frustrated that how come I'm not hearing from this therapist? But when you do the ride along and you realize, the example that I always think of is I did a ride along with somebody who was showing up at a mobile home park, and they were paving the parking lot that day. And so he's going to be late in his schedule. He couldn't get to that patient's home on time because we had to do some creative things to, jump a fence and to get into that home. That if you haven't done it, if you haven't, had to experience the challenges and today this bridge is closed when it wasn't supposed to be closed, or there's weather that's happening that's making schedules not act as they normally would. You have some context for that if you've done the ride along. So I think there's both some specific things, and then some just general appreciation things that we get by doing those ride alongs.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm sitting there picturing this person trying to get there and feeling frustrated because you don't really have the opportunity to reschedule. I mean, you can't say we can't make it today. You have to get there. Yeah, because the patient needs it.
There's a real obligation for that. Yeah. Another funny story I had is there's a patient that again, I've done 14 of these. So imagine the therapists that have thousands of these kinds of visits. Yeah. But I was out with one of our therapists, and she said to me on the way in, she said, I'm a little concerned that that this patient is going to remember that we're here today. She had some cognitive decline. She's hard of hearing. Her daughter is at her own appointment. So, this patient might not know that we're there. And so I said, well, pretend that, the CEO wasn't right along with you today. What would you do? And she said, well, I'd go around the back and I'd jump in through the balcony. I'm like, well, let's go. So that was exactly what we did. But again, just the kind of the tricks of the trade, the daily, challenges that they have to surmount. Just now I had a much greater appreciation for what her life just, and for her, that was just, that's a visit on a Tuesday, but it's not great normal. Context.
Yeah. So if you don't ride along, if you don't put yourself in their shoes, it's really having empathy. It's giving yourself the opportunity to have the right amount of empathy for what they go through, so that you can meet their needs, which means you can ultimately engage them. And
from both sides, really, it's both from what our therapists are going through, and then what our patients are going through. I mean, to receive care in the home is another not typical dynamic that most people are accustomed to, so that there's learnings on both sides of that, so we could have better appreciation for what the patient's going through as well.
Yeah. I would imagine it's a very personal thing.
Oh my gosh.
You have a therapist come in the house.
Oh yeah. I mean, just, so back to what we're endeavoring to do with having just great therapists to do this work. part of that is clinical. I mean, and again, we want to make sure that we have the cream of the crop in terms of the technical skills, but part of it is you're a guest in the home as well. And I keep thinking my mom's going to be 90 on July 4th. And if one of our therapists went in to take care of my mom, I'd say, Mom, how'd it go? And she would not be able to tell me, from a technical standpoint about how good a job Brendan did, but she would be able to say, oh, he was delightful and he's got 2 kids and he's got a dog. And, she'd be able to, but she would be able to relate to me about how Brendan did as a guest in her home, as about somebody that she was happy to talk to. So there's obviously, the technical skills are kind of the greens fees, we expect that, but it's this other component of being able to engage in a very personal setting like that. And the home the home can be a funky place. I mean, there's every variety of setting and every variety of both family type and socioeconomically, and just think about all the different kind of experiences that you might have in a assortment of homes, and our therapists have to be able to go from one to the next, and kind of quickly acclimate to whatever that setting might be. So another just great. It's what's so fantastic about this particular subset of clinicians is that they've got the skill to be able to be really adaptable like that.
But it does need to be supported, which is what you're doing. And it sounds like because it's great to have all that, but it is hard. It's challenging. I'm sure burnout's probably something that you're always conscious of as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's burnout. It's the stress. It's of what they're doing and the demands of it on the home. And I think it's the, again, we obviously have, like any other business, we have metrics and we have, productivity things that we want to measure against. But I think it's balancing that with all those vagaries that we talked about, that in any given day, that patient who's supposed to be technically homebound might have a doctor's appointment and forgot to tell you. So you're going to, by the time you've driven across the bridge and you've gotten to that home, and then they just might not be there, or they can't hear you, or all those other things.
Or you have to break in the balcony.
Or you have to break in, or whatever it might be that we need to have some humanity about the productivity requirements that we have to say, okay, well, this one just couldn't be because of all these reasons, and just to have that balance between those two things.
Yeah. So you've been doing it for 3 years, as we talked about. So, and you have thrown yourself into this. That's obvious. And it sounds like your staff has as well. What are some lessons learned?
Yeah, I think, lots of trial and error along the way. Again, I think what we really tried to keep as it relates to engagement as the North Star is that, is to just not lose our focus on how important it is. I would say that in terms of how we measure it, I think I have more lessons to learn about what is the exact way to take all those vagaries and get it down to a number to say, we're passing or failing when it comes to engagement. It's an art and a science. And I think that there's so much of understanding how we're doing on engagement is subjective. And so it's getting that balance right. We want to have things that we can actually measure, like, it might be response times, or it might be attendance at certain things that we have, or it might be, responses to surveys or NPS or all those kinds of things. But there's kind of the, just the gut check. I mean, okay, so our numbers, whatever, 44 this month. Is it really? I mean, and is it, are we really where we want to be in terms of engagement? So, and I think that's also one of those that is going to be, perpetually just out of arm's reach. I mean, I think if you feel like you've done it all and you've achieved it, then you're probably fooling yourself.
Probably.
So it's to just keep challenging yourself about whatever level you might have achieved and success you've had is, well, then how, like any relationship, then how could we be slightly better? How could we, how could we, really deliver an experience from the engagement standpoint that would be, that would be jaw dropping. So I think it's, those are some of the lessons learned along the way, is to just not get complacent and not be content that just because you've maybe run the checklist that you actually have achieved the result. So it's getting that balance right.
So one of the things we talked about last week was, and this was you admitting a lesson you learned really as the CEO, and that was thinking about how you staffed your different locations and how having a clinical person in charge in each area. Yeah. And it made so much sense to me when you shared it, but I can see how that maybe wasn't the first thing you thought of. So talk to us about that.
So having grown through 7 acquisitions and quite frankly, we were using those acquisitions to develop the model. So I think acquisition number 8 will be easier because now we have the model. We have the in-home therapy way. But as the acquisitions were happening, we were figuring that out as we went. And so we've spent a lot of time and tinkering on what needs to be in the market. So the markets are cities. So in San Antonio, Austin, Corpus Christi, Dallas, Houston, et cetera. What resources do we need to have in those markets physically versus what can be done either remotely or from a centralized location? So we've gone back and forth and really figured that out. But I think what's critical is that what is non-negotiable in that is that you have to have a clinical leader in each of those markets. So just key to really creating the community of therapists that we want to have is that they just have to have that clinician to clinician connection in the market for when they need it. And it's not something that they need every day, but when they do need it, there's sometimes when a clinician just needs to hear from another clinician, and it could be around performance. It could be just a technical question that somebody who's never done it can't answer. So I think that was one of the learnings along the way was making sure that we had the right clinical organization in the field to support our clinicians.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is, which I think is so commendable, is engagement's hugely important. It's something you're always focused on, always tracking. And you realize it's something that you're always going to have to focus on and track and adjust as necessary, right? And I kept thinking of something my mom used to say, and I don't know why she said it, but something about resting on your laurels. And, right? And you just can't. I'm not even sure what laurels are, but we can't rest on them, Or as you said, right, we can't get complacent. We can't just say, hey, this is good enough. We've got good scores. We have a growing company. And
I think it's such a great point. It's also recognizing that business changes every day and that what worked last quarter might not work this quarter. So, at one point, and maybe this was closer to pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, was, we put a lot of time and energy around town halls. And then we said, well, over the last few years, well, maybe those aren't as important now because people are maybe just burned out on any interaction via video. But now we're thinking, that it might be, the time might be right to reintroduce that. Again, just thinking about one tactic, but, our sort of sine curve of adoption of that has changed just as our workforce has changed, as their maturity with us has changed. And, so I think it's preserving that mindset that we're going to do it and measure it and make sure that it's productive and get feedback. But it's again, it can't be set it, forget it. It's going to be a dynamic, road, and we're going to get some things wrong. But hopefully our community of therapists will also appreciate that and do us the favor of telling us, hey, you screwed that one up. That was a waste of my time. So please don't do that again. But let's go back to this. So it's back to, again, us being a good listener, but creating an environment where they have the opportunity to tell us as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think when you have the engagement, it makes it easier then to create that culture of feedback.
Right.
Where you give them feedback and they give you feedback that you really need. So
another example, we, in the early innings, we thought that happy hours would be the way to engage. Yeah. But when you've got, the markets that are the size of the markets that we're dealing in. One of the expressions I learned when we first got into Texas, I'll pick Houston, but everything in Houston's an hour from Houston. So if you pick a spot to have a happy hour, just it's going to be limiting, and you're going to be like, well, we did it, check the box. We threw a happy hour, but a lot of your workforce is going to be so far away that is either, you didn't do them any favors, right, because you made them drive,
an hour one way. Exactly. Right.
Or they just couldn't make it. And then so I think it was things like that to just, have an appreciation for just continuing to work on the tactics that would produce the engagement and not have a negative effect.
Right. So I'm listening to you talk, and it all sounds amazing, but what occurs to me, and I guess, well, I'll just ask the question. I mean, is there one person in your organization who this is their sole focus? Because it sounds like it almost could be.
Yeah. I think right now it's a shared responsibility, and there's probably lots of ways to do this. And this might be one that changes for us throughout time. But we felt that if we made it just one person's job, then it wouldn't have the shared responsibility that I think it needs. I think it needs to have our ops team thinking about it, and our clinical leaders thinking about it, and our HR team thinking about it.
So for like an input standpoint, you think it's better when you get the input from the various sources.
And myself, I mean, I think it needs to have this kind of sharing of both input to the process, but and then also making sure that we're delivering on it. So back to if we had just one person doing it, I think that would be, and I've had this debate largely in my head, but I've had this debate about whether it is right to just say, this is somebody's sole responsibility, but I think it's too big for that. I think it needs to be just because I think it's so fundamental to our culture that we're focused on engagement in this way. I think it needs to be broader than that.
Yeah.
So, but, if you had me back in 6 months, I might give you a different answer.
Yeah. So. Okay. Well, but it's not an easy answer. I mean, I get why you have these conversations in your head, right. Because you have rattled off, I think, at least 10 or 15 things that you have to consider in this, while thinking about the overall topic of or concept of engagement.
Yeah.
So, and there's many different areas to attack it, I think, or many different areas to approach it from. I think there's many different areas that can impact it, so that's a lot.
Yeah. So again, I don't want it to be, well, that's not my job. I want everyone to feel like, well, this is, it's part of all of our jobs.
Yeah. So. Cool. All right. So, a lot accomplished so far in 3 years within InHome.
Yeah,
you've grown a lot. You've had all the acquisition that you've done. You've got 700 and some therapists, and wow. What's next?
Yeah, I think, we've been building some technology along the way, and even there, the technology that we've been building has been around improving the experience and the lives of our therapists. So it's designed to just take some administrative churn out of their day, help them manage tasks, manage calendars, manage route optimization, and those kinds of things. So we're getting that rolled out for the rest of this year, and then. So in the meantime, it's focusing on organic growth and getting denser in the markets where we are. So we're in, as I mentioned, the 4 regions, but it's 11 different cities in those regions. And then as we move into 2025, it'll be to look at, continue to get density in the current markets. Then think about whether they're markets we want to expand to, either de novo or through more acquisitions.
Fun.
Yeah.
So last question for you. And we've talked about your lessons learned, right, as CEO of InHome as it relates to engagement. I'm sure there's other lessons you have as well. But when you think about your career, and the different roles that you've played or the different areas where you've been the CEO, what would you say has been your greatest lesson as a CEO?
Yeah, I think it's probably a lesson that I've been relearning multiple times, but I think in so many businesses, but in healthcare services in particular, that they're people businesses, and so I think when you develop a thesis and you look at everything in a financial model. You can convince yourself that you can really manage just solely around metrics, but it's a people business, and so you can't lose sight of the fact. I think if you were to ask people, tell me about your best boss or manager, they might start with some of the technical things, but then they're going to talk about moral things. They're going to talk about they treated me with respect, and they treated me fairly, and they treated me with consideration, and because of that, they were more productive, and they had a better experience, and they produced probably more results of whatever that result would be. So I think it's not losing sight of that fact when you're in a people business, that you have to lead with and create a culture around those moral things of fairness, respect, and consideration.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because in the emotional intelligence class that I teach for leaders, that's how we start the whole session. Is thinking about who has been your favorite leader, or who was the best leader you ever worked under, and list all the attributes or characteristics on the sticky, and then go up and put it on, the flip chart where it aligns. So is it a cognitive skill? Is it a technical skill? Or is it an emotional skill? And it's always emotional that gets the most, right? That's the impact. And it's exactly what you were saying. That's what someone's going to remember. That's who they're going to want to work hard for. That's who they're going to be committed to.
Who they're going to feel engaged.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Awesome. Good.
We brought it full circle.
We did a great job of that.
I think we did.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today and for this conversation. Awesome. I enjoyed it too.